readers! Welcome back to Reading in the Middle. I am your host, Annisha Jeffries. Today, I'm joined by Karina Yan Glaser, the beloved author of the Vanderbeekers series and a Duet for Home. Her newest book, The 9 Moons of Han Yu and Luli, is her first foray into historical fantasy, and it's extraordinary. The story follows Han Yu, a boy in ancient Chang'an China, who has a mysterious gift, the ability to summon tigers. At the same time, across the world, in the Depression-era New York's Chinatown, Luli, a young girl with big dreams of art and dim sum, must navigate hardships and hope. Their journeys intertwine across centuries and continents. Both characters confront danger and fight to save their families. I'll talk with Karina about what drew her to these two settings, how she approached writing historical fiction for the first time, and why she believes middle grade is the perfect space to explore courage, resilience, and belonging. Let's begin. Hi, Karina. Welcome to Reading in the Middle. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
Me too. And let's start for our listeners. So, Karina, for those who haven't heard about your new book yet, could you give us a quick summary who Han Yu and Louis are and what kind of adventures do they take us on?
Of course. So I am a middle grade author. In the past, I've written contemporary middle grade books, and I have spent many years working on a series that follows a family called the Vanderbeekers. And then I also wrote a standalone book called A Duet for Home, and that was also contemporary. And in this new book, it's called The 9 Moons of Han Yu and Luli. I really wanted to explore historical fiction because that is the genre that I love reading the most. That is just a passion of mine. And so I decided to try it. And in this book, there are 2 main characters, and they live in different countries and in different time periods. So it's not a time travel book. They're not traveling to see each other. They are connected in a way, though. But there are, the 2 time periods, and the chapters flip back and forth between the 2 main characters. In Han Yu's chapter, he lives in ancient China, so 731 in the Tang Dynasty, which is a time where there was a lot of beautiful art and poetry and painting. It just was a very artistic time in the dynastic periods of China. And so he is living in the capital city, which is Chang'an, and he has to go on an adventure to do something to possibly save his family. And so he embarks on the Silk Roads, which at that time was these interconnected trading routes that traveled all through China and India and Iran and, just the whole continent. So he has to sort of take a risk and go on those routes. And on the other side, the other half of the book is Luli's story, and she lives in 1931, so about 100 years from where we are now, and she lives in New York City in Chinatown, and she is living in a time with her family where there is a lot of economic uncertainty. Around that time, there was the Great Depression, which was a really difficult time for many families. There was a lot of poverty and hunger. And so she's living in that time period. Her parents own a restaurant that is getting steadily less business because people don't have money to eat out. And so she is trying to figure out sort of solutions to trying to drum up business and save their home. So yeah, when I was writing the book, it was quite complicated. So it's sort of complicated to explain it, and I really struggle to say it in a concise way, but that's sort of the gist of the book.
But you just did. And that was a nice, concise way that, that this gives just a glimpse into the two worlds. And you mentioned that this is your first time with historical fiction, which you said that you really like. And one of the things that I loved is that the stories there, like Han Yu, he has a powerful connection to tigers. What do they mean for him as a character, and what do you hope readers see in them?
Right. So Hanyu has a powerful connection with animals in general. So he is the type of person that he's walking along the street and there are animals following him, and he just has an ability to really connect with them. And it's funny because the tiger and the symbolism of the tiger is interesting because he never really feels like he sees the tiger or interacts with it at all. And during that time when he lived in Chang'an, it was surrounded by really tall walls. So it was a very secure area to live in. And the reason why they had those walls was to keep wild animals out and to keep intruders out. And there were like murmurings in the city that he had this way with animals and that, a tiger follows him, and he just sort of brushes those off. Like he doesn't really feel like he has seen that himself. Although, I think deep in his heart, he feels there is that connection, but he doesn't quite get to that point that he really knows that that's happening. And I think, why I wanted to do that was that I wanted him to feel like he could embark on this journey while sort of having like this protector around him, even though he didn't really understand what that was, that, it's quite a dangerous journey. And I think he needed something that was going to be sort of watching over him in a way. And I think it's only, well, I don't want to give away the story, but yeah, I think like a lot of the story, he really does feel like he doesn't understand why people are making such a big deal out of this connection where he didn't himself feel like he had seen it in person.
Yes, and then with Louise' love for art and and dim sum,
Yeah.
it's like her way of holding on to joy. How did you use food and creativity um to show who she is inside?
Yeah, so Lee is she was an interesting character too, because I think she had always connected with food and felt like this sense that connected her to her family and to her heritage. And I think, for her, it was really important for her to take ownership more and like wanting to have more of that connection to the family business and being more involved. So a lot of her story is really trying to find her spot in that part of her family's history and owning that and her creative thinking around that.
So also, was there something surprising that you discovered while researching, maybe about the food festivals or daily life, that made you say, this has to go into the book?
Yes, absolutely. I did so much research. When I was writing this book, my esteem and respect for people who write historical fiction just like went through the roof. I had already like very, very much respected people who handled historical fiction because not only do you have to be so accurate, it's almost like you have to know it so well that you yourself could go back in time and live in that time period and be like, no one would know that you didn't live in that time period. So it's a lot of research. I originally had started with the idea of just Luli's story. So I was just working in 1931. But as I was diving into her story, into dim sum and her restaurant and researching dim sum, I realized that that connection to the Silk Roads is so strong because originally dim sum, came from the Silk Roads. That was a way of cooking food with heat with like steam. So it became like an easy way to prepare hot foods and small bites of foods for people who were traveling on these roads. So when I saw that connection, I started digging in a little bit more and seeing, researching Chang'an, that capital city. And then I was looking closely at the maps of Chang'an and I saw that it was so similar to New York City in the layout. So New York City is, surrounded, well, New York City is a very big city, but one of the boroughs is surrounded by water. So it's surrounded by rivers on either side, and then New York Harbor that leads into the ocean. So it was a very like protected piece of land, these natural borders. And I was also, made in a grid system. So the streets are in a grid system and there are neighborhoods within New York City. And then I was looking at Chang'an and there was also a border around it, a protective border. It wasn't water, but it was these, 12-foot tall walls that they had created. So they had that border. They were also laid out in a grid system. They had avenues and streets, just like New York City, and they had neighborhoods. So all of the, there are little pockets of neighborhoods all throughout Chang'an. So even though it's not exactly the same, I mean, to think about, these two cities existing thousands of years apart and being so similar in how they um, operated as a city, it was really startling to me. And that's when I started thinking maybe there is a connection here that I can weave into this story. And so it was surprising to me because I never thought I would write, so far in history. I thought like 1931 was enough. Like that was already really difficult to research because while that period is very well documented, the neighborhood I was researching was not well documented because, during that time, like immigration, especially from China, was extremely limited. And I think a lot of the people who were living in that small pocket of Chinatown, they didn't want to rock the boat. They didn't want to bring a lot of attention to them. So they were just like a very self-enclosed community within New York City, which is another thing that Luli is grappling with too. Her family is very much like, we need to stay in this little bubble because it's not safe to go outside the bubble. And she wants to explore outside and she's almost forced to. All of those little things, I mean, it took so long for this book to really take shape. Honestly felt like so many times like I wasn't sure if this was going to be able to connect in the way that I wanted to because there were so many moving pieces and there was also so many different things that I was wanting to incorporate in the story that I wasn't sure was connecting. Yeah, it was just the whole process was really beautiful, but also very frustrating. I think also because the way they track time is so different. Luli in 1931 is on the Gregorian calendar. And then looking back at Hanyu's story, that is on a lunar calendar. So it was like very confusing in my brain to like connect all those pieces. But I'm glad it's finally coming out. Like for a long time when I was working with my editor, we were going back and forth with the stories for a very long time. And I almost felt like we were never going to ever get to the finish line because I was like, we're just going to be editing forever and that's okay. It was like a very beautiful time. And yeah, it feels a little strange that like the book is going out into the world and other people are going to read it besides the two of us.
Yes, well, it's wonderful, and really did your research so well and wonderful, and just such a beautiful book. When you mentioned Luli wanting to go out, not being in that bubble, both Han Yu and Luli face huge dangers. So there's the plague, there's poverty, like you mentioned, family struggle. How did you balance that seriousness and those challenges with hope and courage?
I mean, I think I try to do that in all my stories is, all of us, we're living in this world that is very uncertain and is many times confusing and difficult things happen, to everyone. No one is protected from that. And I think, it is a delicate balance. And I feel like it's, an honor to write a story that contains things that are real that we're all grappling with, but also like looking at the joyful side of it too. For both of them, they're facing like probably, the hardest thing that they had faced in their life up to that point. But
Mhm.
there's also, lots of joy and like unexpected gifts that happen at the same time. And I think that goes for all of us, like at any stage in our lives where, we're really struggling with something or there's just a really tough time. But then you find yourself surrounded by a community that supports you, or you find something that you can do that brings you strength and all these different things that sort of come up because you're facing a challenging time. So, yeah, that's what for Luli, she's facing all this. And I think at the beginning of the story, she feels very much alone. And, she has her best friend, but she has two best friends, one friend that lives in her building and then one at school. But at school, like that really is just her one friend. But through the course of the story, she starts building relationships with other people in her class, which
Mhm.
I think that was something that she didn't really expect, but they almost had to like, work together. And I think she felt like her world grew a little bit through the challenge. She went into neighborhoods she had never been to before, and she felt supported by a community that, was outside her own community. So it was really fun to write like a lot of her scenes because it was fun to write, like, for example, her classmates who are like a little quirky and a little funny. And yeah, I just really enjoyed doing that.
And Karina, I want to say that with all of your work, which I've read, it seems like you just have so much fun writing all of your books. You can just tell the joy and the fun and uh, of the stories that you brought to teachers, educators, and middle grade readers. I want to just go and talk about A Duet for Home that came out in 2022. That was the standalone you were writing during your Vanderbeeker series, and I just love that book. And in The Duet from Home, music also becomes almost like another character. Just like the brownstone was a character in Vanderbeekers. Did you always know music would play that role, or did it surprise you while writing?
Well, first of all, thank you. Yeah, I mean, for a duet for home, there needed to be something like connected the two main characters. In A Duet for Home, it's about two kids, they're sixth graders, and they sort of become unlikely friends. The reason why they find each other is because they both find themselves living in a homeless shelter. And one of them has lived there for a few years, and the other one just moves in. On day one, that's where the story begins. And I wanted something that could connect them. But I also wanted to address something that I find a lot in classical music in particular is that, it's not like a type of music that is easily accessible to all people. And I think also it's a form of music that can be difficult to understand. And I think what I really loved about A Duet for Home is that the main character, Tyrell, he had always known that he loved that music, but he wasn't sure like what instrument was making that music. How did you do that? And for June, the other protagonist, she had always loved playing the violin or the viola, and she loved music and classical music. And So there were things that they could teach each other. So because she had that knowledge of music, she could sort of share that with him. And then he could teach her a lot because he had been living, at Huey House for many years. And there were a lot of ways that he was able to give her confidence and, teaching her to stand up for herself. And it was like such a beautiful story for me to write because I worked in homeless shelters for many years and I felt really impacted by the kids that I worked with. Like I see the ways they support each other and like through such difficult and complicated feelings, they're able to find strength in what they were good at and share that with each other. And so I really wanted to capture that. So, yeah, and music is a big part of my family's life. My daughter's a violinist. She has been since she's been 4, and she still is like really loves it now. And it's because of her that I've learned appreciation for it. And so it weaves through all of the Vanderbeeker books and A Duet
Yeah.
for Home. And I've really enjoyed, like, exploring that more, and, yeah, A Duet for Home definitely was, like, the one where I felt like music had, like, that impact that the impact I wanted. Yeah.
Yes, because you wrote honestly about homelessness.
Hmm.
And, but you also filled the book with friendship and joy. And that seems to be a running theme throughout your books. And it's just so, you know, contagious. It's so beautifully weaving in all of your stories. Was there one scene in A Duet for Home where you felt that balance most clearly?
Well, for A Duet for Home, one of my favorite scenes was sort of, like, when June and Tyrell first meet. So they know of each other because of something unfortunate that happens. Because Tyrell's a little bit of a prankster and sort of like a prank went awry. And so she knows of him because of that. And then they do connect because she's trying to figure out like how is she going to get her instrument back because the shelter had confiscated it when she moved in. She just like didn't really know how to get it back. And then when she did get it back, she didn't know where to practice without drawing attention. And so there's this funny scene where she's like, sneaking out of her room and Tyrell is like wandering the halls and he's like trying to figure out like what's in this case that she's carrying. He doesn't know like what's inside. He doesn't know that the instrument's inside. So he's like guessing that she's, got, you know, lock picking equipment and just like different little like weird things in there. And he's sort of like because he's so savvy and smart, he like is able to draw like some sort of bargain. Like he was gonna show her where she can practice, but she would have to like show him what's inside the case. And like, he continues to like be like, well, can I touch it? Can I hold, like and
Mhm.
the instrument is very precious to her. So it's funny to see like them both like pushing a little bit against like their own boundaries in a way. But yeah, so that was like sort of a funny moment. But I think like another moment was, when June realizes June has always known that music can sort of express emotions for her. She's very like internal and she doesn't really express herself well in words. So music was an outlet. And I think there's moments where she is able to figure out that that's also a way for Tyrell to have an outlet as well for his emotions because he's holding a lot inside too. And he has a lot of things in his life that he doesn't talk about. So like music for him too is a way for him to express himself. So when she's able to help him get lessons, then it becomes another sort of way that they are bound together. Yeah, it was a really special book to write, and I was happy that I was able to get it done. That was also a really difficult book to write because it was, like the situation is complicated when kids are experiencing homelessness, and there's a lot to say in that book, but also you don't want to put too much in it and like make it like bulky. So yeah, that also took a long time. And I think I also really needed to grow as a writer. That would never have been like the first book out of the gate. Like I needed to develop as a writer and figure out like how I wanted to tell the story. So it took quite a long time to get that one done.
Oh, well, I love that book. And
Thank
speaking
you.
of books that I love, but I hate to see go, the Vanderbeekers have been a part of kids' lives for 7 books. Can you believe it? 7 books.
I
It's
know.
amazing. What do you think kept readers so connected to them over the years?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I loved writing those books because it reminded me of sort of the books that I loved when I was growing up. Like, I just love like big families and just
Yeah.
chaos. And I, like, I just felt like that was my go-to books when I was growing up. And I wanted to write about that. And at the same time, like, my own family was growing up. When I first started writing the Vanderbeekers, my own younger child was 4 3/4, so that was Lainey's age, who was the youngest Vanderbeeker, and it was a way of, like, writing about our family in a way, and so, I'm not really sure. I mean, I get so much mail about the Vanderbeekers. It's so funny. Like, even today, I opened my email and there was like a little note from a reader who lives in Dubai who has the Vanderbeekers and loves them and wanted to tell me why she liked them. So it was really sort of been a joy. I mean, I think, based on like the letters I get. So I get like some emails and a lot of letters. And a lot of the letters really love connecting their own families to like the characters in the Vanderbeekers. Some people really like the animals that are involved. Some people just, they like the adventures or they like reading about a family that goes through regular family stuff like they do. So it's not like a book where the kids are, like saving the universe or like doing these big things. It's just like normal kids going about their lives and like a lot of times dealing with some of the things that, a lot of kids are dealing with growing up and like growing pains and big emotions and feelings. And yeah, those are my favorite.
When you wrote The Vanderbeekers Ever After, what was it like to say goodbye to those characters?
Now, that was a really tough book to write. I mean, so that book, I like had always known that, that book was it was going to end at 7. So it was like a little bittersweet too, because I knew I was going to end the series, but I also didn't want to mail in that book. Like, I think sometimes, when you're really invested in a series. I've had this experience as a reader where I just like love a series. That book was more than just like the last book. It was saying goodbye to the characters and trying to figure out how to put together that book in a way that honored all the readers who love that series. I didn't want them to get to the last book and be like, "Oh, that was sort of disappointing." So I had to like really think about that one a lot. And also, it was a tough topic in that one. And that, actually came about, like that storyline actually came about because when I was touring with Vanderbeekers and doing bookstore events, like I heard so many families tell me about health issues that they had experienced. And we were sort of like in the, COVID era. And, a lot of families are really struggling. And they were telling me that they would read the Vanderbeekers together as a family, as just like a book that everyone could read together. And it was just like a bit of like levity, in this like a hard time. So yeah, the Vanderbeekers Ever After really came from hearing a lot of stories of families struggling, and I really wanted to make the Vanderbeekers a family that people could relate to, and that was a really interesting book too because I wasn't sure how people would take that, and it's been really interesting because a lot of the mail I've gotten from that book was people who knew someone who was struggling with cancer or families that were had like someone a member of their family who had cancer. And so that was really powerful for me to know that was something that people could relate to, and especially for families that maybe knew of some, like, a classmate had cancer, and then
Yes.
after reading that book, they knew sort of what that process was like what the treatment was like, and like what that was like for the family, and so they were able to better support, their classmate because they had read that book. So yeah. But yeah, it was very bittersweet to finish it. And actually, the last line in that book is the last line in the very first Vanderbeekers book. So it was like a very full circle moment because the Vanderbeekers of 141st Street ends around Christmas, and then the Vanderbeekers Ever After ends at Christmas.
Yes, I must say, I just loved all of the books. And one day, I mean, maybe a spinoff series, you never know with on some of the characters, something
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, maybe. I have one more question for the nine moons of Han Yu and Luli.
Mhm.
Han Yu and Luli could meet each other across time. What do you think they'd say to each other?
That's a great question. I never thought of them ever meeting because they live so far apart, but I definitely feel like they would be friends. Like, I could see them being really compatible and and like, yeah, like I feel like they would have a lot to talk about. Yeah, I'm thinking about it, but it's sort of funny because they do live in such different places and time periods, and their customs are so different. But I
Yes,
think at the root of it, like, they have really big hearts, and they really have a lot of the same values and things that are important to them, so I feel like they would be really good friends.
think so. I agree. I think they'd be great friends. Karina, do you have any rituals, maybe a favorite snack, playlist, or even a quirky habit that help you when you're creating these big emotional stories?
Yeah, okay, well, one weird habit that I have, every time I draft a first draft, I always write it really, really fast. So, I think that's a good tip for a lot of people because when we're writing a first draft, oftentimes we feel like it has to be perfect right out the gate. And it can be really frustrating when you're working on this draft and like the characters aren't doing what you want them to do, and you can't figure out what the plot is supposed to be, and everything is just sort of haywire. And what I try to do is, I guess what helps me with writing messy first drafts is writing them really fast. So I learned that from a sort of this annual tradition that this organization does. It's called National Novel Writing Month. And they challenge people to write a novel in 1 month. And so that's how I actually wrote The Vanderbeekers. And at the end of that month, the first Vanderbeekers was terrible. But I did have the main characters. Like, that was like, I had the main characters and I had the setting. So that was basically what I got out of that month, and like a lot of bad writing. So I realized when I did that, though, is that you really do sort of have to force yourself to write, and also force yourself to be okay with things not being exactly the way you want them at the beginning. And even like after the fourth, fifth, sixth draft, sometimes it's still not that great. And that's okay. I still like really struggle with that. And I think all of us do. Like, we just want to like do it and just have it be like, ready to go. But so one thing I do with like every new book is I draft it in 1 month. And I also eat hot and spicy Cheez-Its, which are just like terrible for you. But I don't know. That just works for me. Like, that's like when I'm doing, because I know that month that's like all I'm focused on. And I just like eat hot and spicy Cheez-Its and work on that first draft, which is like a very weird, I think I feel like I have to change the snack like as I'm getting older, because it's just, like, not that great to be eating that many hot and spicy Cheez-Its at my age. I'm, like, experimenting with popcorn as, like, an alternative, but it's just, like, not the same.
No, it's not. Maybe Cheetos, baked
Yeah,
Cheetos.
maybe Cheetos. my younger kid really loves Cheetos, so yeah, I don't know. I maybe like some other cheese snack. Just cheese, maybe just plain cheese. I don't know.
Do you have like any music that you play in the background, or is there a playlist that is a go-to playlist that you may have?
Yeah, I definitely listen to music when I write. It changes with each book, actually. So with the Nine Moons, I listen to a lot of show tunes, like Broadway show tunes. And yeah, I don't know why, but like Vanderbeekers, I listen to a lot of like pop music. Duet for home, like definitely a lot of classical music. Yeah, each book is like a little different, sort of interesting.
Maybe you can, if you haven't already, maybe create a Spotify playlist for your book.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I've seen like some of my friends have done that, and yeah, I think maybe I'll try that. Although I like feel like a little afraid because people, I feel like people would like have instant judgment on like what I listen to.
Please, I don't know,
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm ready.
if you could borrow one of Han Yu's tigers for a day, what would you do?
Okay. I would probably go on a really long walk with it. Yeah.
Which Vanderbeeker sibling would you want as your best friend?
Well, that's a good one. Probably Hyacinth.
A book you loved as a kid that still inspires you today.
A tree grows in Brooklyn.
Which of your books made you laugh most while writing, and which one made you cry?
All the books make me cry when I'm writing them, which is sort of like embarrassing when I'm like working at a coffee shop and I'm like crying and typing. The one that makes me laugh the most, oh gosh, maybe I'm looking at the titles right now. Maybe To the Rescue. That's the third book. There's a lot of like animal chaos going on in that one, which was fun to write. The one that made me cry the most, probably The Vanderbeekers Lost and Found. That's the fourth book. And then probably tied with the last book, The Vanderbeekers Ever After.
If your pets could sneak into one of your books, what role would they play?
Oh, they've definitely snuck into my books already. Yeah, in The Vanderbeekers Ever After, actually, one of my dogs, like, I had to use him as research for that book because one of the things I incorporated in The Vanderbeekers Ever After was therapy dogs. And I didn't really know much about therapy dogs. I had not gone to like a school that had therapy dogs or ever like been in a situation where therapy dogs visited me. So
Hmm.
like called up our local therapy dog place and enrolled my dog in therapy training classes. So we therapy dogs get trained with a person. So we come a team. So we like went through the whole training program and testing and we like did some therapy dog sessions after we passed the test. Yeah. So he definitely like ended up in a way in the Vanderbeekers Ever After, like his spirit.
That's wonderful. Karina, thank you so much for joining me on Reading in the Middle. Your book, The Nine Moons of Hanyu and Luli, it's coming out this month, this September. It's going to have a book birthday, and I'm
Yes.
so thrilled for you. I've always been a big fan, and I just want to say thank you so, so much for joining me. This has been such a pleasure, and I want to thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all the wonderful interviews you do and for your advocacy for middle grade books. You know, we really appreciate it, all of us. Thank you for your voice and for your support and just for, I don't know, just loving kids and wanting the best for them. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you. That was Karina Yan Glaser, author of The Vanderbeekers, A Duet for Home, and now The Nine Moons of Hanyu and Luli, a sweeping, imaginative story that bridges cultures and generations. It's a book that invites readers to see the world and themselves in new ways. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend adding it to your list. It's historical fiction with a heart, and it's perfect for classrooms, families, and anyone who loves great adventure. Thanks for listening to Reading in the Middle. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, share the episode, and help us spread the word. And as always, keep reading in the middle.